Well, I thought I'd seen it all. And then I saw football this last week, and it's chaos. Welcome to chaos. Welcome to this episode of Rustbelt Rundown here on the Jump City Sports Podcast Network, brought to you by our friends at Rubbish Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more info, go to the website, www.rubbishinvestments.com. You can call their phone number during normal business hours at 814-734-3433. A little under the weather tonight, but man, we have to get talking about tonight. What a day. What a chaotic weekend in football, and so much to talk about. Of course, we all know what we're going to talk about, but just crazy, just craziness. We just heard, by the way, from Paul Adamczyk. Paul is, of course, starting the Draft Podcast. If you missed that episode, which aired at 7 o'clock, make sure to stay tuned for more. Every single Tuesday, he'll have an episode of the Draft Podcast because we're 100 days out from the draft, and the draft is being held in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh has the draft that they know is coming, but they don't have a head coach, so they don't know who's coming for the head coaching job. It's wild. If I had $1 for every head coach in the AFC North right now, I'd have $1. Welcome in, Wayne Bradford, my friend. We were talking last week about how the Ravens were in a peril. John Harbaugh was gone. Browns needed a new head coach with Kevin Stefanski stepping down, and then this bomb drops. What do you make of this?
I'm not surprised, and I'm not surprised because the level of the beatdown last night. If it's a competitive game, I think, he stays. But when you're the head guy and you're getting mauled and the crowd is, it's a tough environment to work in when, 40, 60, 80,000 people are saying fire Tomlin, and, he doesn't have to be there, obviously. Right. Yeah. He's going to be gainfully employed next year, probably in TV. You'll probably get into more about with the resignation, how Pittsburgh owns his rights. So another team would have to essentially, trade for that. But I'm not surprised with the way they got beat. And with what happened to Harbaugh, it just set the precedent that, hey, it doesn't matter what you've done in the past. These new owners, even though this is an older ownership group, the fans, social media, there's so much external noise now that really shapes things. And I think Rodgers said it in a couple of his interviews prior to Tomlin getting out, that Tomlin, LaFleur, these guys are the guys. They're great coaches. And, you have the great guy in place, but the external pressure is so great. You see what happens. You're on mute, or I lost your sound.
No, I am on mute. Maybe I should be on mute based on what I've got to want to say. My initial reaction to this is, this is crazy, because this is something that I think is equally as stunning as it is predictable. And it's not something that we can say very often in football or in sports, is that we saw something coming in or yet as shocked. When I look at this, I think, it makes sense, right? Forget the way they lost last night. I think just in general, the fact that they have struggled as much as they have in postseason, the fact that they can't seem to get over the hump in terms of getting the offense right with all the different quarterbacks they had. And even with Aaron Rodgers, we saw last night, they couldn't get anything going offensively. They were just terrible. They had one good drive, and that was it. I think, though, for me, the biggest surprise in this is the fact that they waited as long as they did to do this. You hear out of the Tomlin camp that he had been mulling this over for upwards of 2 to 3 years as to whether or not he wanted to remain the coach. And I was under the impression that a few years back, I think this was after the Kansas City loss, right? The one in 2021 or 2022. If they weren't going to pull the trigger then, they were never going to pull the trigger. I understand he didn't get fired here. He stepped down. But my belief was that Pittsburgh's organization was, let's call it stubborn enough, Wayne, to say that at this point in 2022, whenever that playoff loss was, we don't want to admit that we have a coach that's not capable of leading us to a championship anymore. And we're going to ride this out until we literally can't anymore. And the biggest part of the news for me today is the fact that it was not a firing, it was a resignation, to your point with, say, still own the right to his contract. So you can talk all the talk about how, they're moving on, but this was not an ownership decision. Maybe it was, but in public facing, it wasn't. it is amazing to me how we have to wait until this moment for the organization to say, we either messed up or we went too long with this. I think this is something that should have been done a few years ago if they were going to do it. And I'm surprised because, again, I go back to Wayne. I was under the impression that after 2022, they were gonna ride him out until he either retired or, in this case, stepped down. Because I don't think they ever wanted to admit that they made a mistake keeping him as long as they did.
Well, you could be right, but they could have evaluated the situation in 2022 and there couldn't have been any candidates out there that they thought might be replacing. Now, with 8 firings, you've got your choice, right? And I don't know if we're going to get into it or where you want to go.
We will.
But I've said this name before, and if you want me to lead into it, I mean, now's the time to bring the prodigal son home. Mike McCarthy, right? He's a Pittsburgh native. He's won a Super Bowl. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers can last another year or whatever, but if you've got a guy, that's won, and a guy that's very well respected, to me, Pittsburgh has to hire an offensive-minded coach, and Baltimore has to hire a defensive-minded coach. That's where I'll leave it.
So I'll get into the coaching, in my opinion, on who they should hire in a minute, and we can delve more into that. But Tomlin's only 53. That's the other crazy thing. He could easily coach, and he could coach a lot longer. But I think when you look at where this organization is at, Wayne, and we could go down this rabbit hole. My opinion, I don't think you need to tear it down, but you're certainly not going to have the veteran names that you've had in the past, right? I mean, Cam Hayward likely is not coming back if he chooses to play. He was the Tomlin guy. I don't think TJ Watt will be back after his current contract. He's 32 years old. I don't see a re-signing happening there. So I think this signals to me a change in direction back to the youth movement for Pittsburgh. It has to, because this was and I guess we should have known at the beginning of the year, this was a one shot and that's it situation with all the veterans they brought in, with all the older players that were part of the team, and clearly with Tomlin. It was a one opportunity for you to win a Super Bowl, and if not, everybody else is going to go. But, when I look at the history of Tomlin, I think of what could have been, right? And the fact that this is a guy who clearly is one of the best motivators in football. I think he could go to any other team, Wayne, whether it's Baltimore, which he's not going to, but that would be kind of funny. He could go to a Miami, he could go to a Giants, he could go to a Raiders, and he would immediately make an impact, right? Make an impact, get that team situated and focused. But I guess the question that will always be unanswered is he more a great motivator than a great coach? And I think it's just unfortunate the way it ended with the Steelers, that's the question we have to ask, because you think of all the teams they had in the late 2010s with the offense and what they were able to do with Bell and Brown and Roethlisberger. And I just think it was, in my view, one Super Bowl is great. A lot of coaches don't win any, but there were a lot of missed opportunities in that 19-year tenure. And I think he's just a better coach than what his resume would suggest, in my opinion, but we're never going to get to see it in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think, to your point, it's very interesting. Like, is he a better motivator than coach? Well, what did he coach, right? Did he ever coach anything? Same thing with Harbaugh. The things that frustrated me the most with Harbaugh, especially most recently, was how poor Baltimore became on special teams. This guy was a special teams guy. And early on, Baltimore was great on special teams. They were apathetic and terrible on special teams. Just the mistakes, fair catching it inside your 5 and fumbling it, kicking the ball out of bounds and giving the team the ball in the 40, missed field goals, blocked punts, just no help on special teams. And then I would say the same thing on defense with Tomlin. Outside of the last few weeks, I really did think Terrell Austin became much more creative this year. Mm-hmm. Did some really good things in the blitz game, affected the quarterback probably more with pressures this year than that front. So I do think that they made some steps further there. But to your point, the one and done, it was the same thing last year with Russell Wilson. Like, is it the GM that has to go? Just like, is it the GM that should have gone in Cleveland? All right. The product that's on the field isn't a good enough product. So who's responsible for the product on the field? Right? The coach can only do so much with a two-star talent, let's say. This isn't college. This isn't the transfer portal. You're dealing with grown men that are all incredible athletes, right? Is it their fault that DK drops the ball on the over when he's wide open? I mean,
Right.
is it the offensive coordinator is fired at Philadelphia? Is it his fault that AJ Brown dropped open balls all over the middle? Who's responsible for that ultimately? And is it Harbaugh's fault? Luke missed the field goal. All those things are what ifs.
And I think that's the most frustrating thing to me, and I think a lot of Steelers fans and people who follow the team, is there were so many what ifs and so many closes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even last night, the game was 30-6, but it was 10-6 until the middle of the fourth quarter.
Yep.
It's not like we were looking at a blowout the entire time. And you look at the Tomlin tenure, I think in the last 10 years, this is the epitome of what he was. Right. He was a guy who you saw the highs at times, and we saw it in the second half against the Ravens, right, Wayne? We saw it in the game against the Lions where the offense played really, really well and the defense held late. And you get so frustrated because you think this team is more than capable. And they've done it for so many years where they have games where you think, why aren't they like this every week? And then the next week it becomes a free fall, right? The roller coaster ride, like you talked about before the show about what the Ravens are on. Pittsburgh is the epitome of that. And my concern is that whoever they hire next, and I'm going to get to who I think they should hire in a minute, is it a Tomlin thing or is it a culture thing? And I think we're going to find that out because very quickly you will find out whether or not this roller coaster ride continues or whether it doesn't. And I don't know how much of it's Tomlin, Wayne, but it was so frustrating every single time that you watched this team because you knew it was in them. You knew they had the potential. You knew they had the capability. I thought still they could win the game last night midway through the fourth quarter, even with the offense not doing anything. And it just never materialized. And I think that, to me, is the worst spot to be in football. You're not bad enough to have a top 10 pick. You're not good enough to win a Super Bowl. I think Pittsburgh and Baltimore in the same situation in a stable of mediocrity. That's the scariest place to be in football and probably the reason why they're both out of a head coach.
Yeah, both teams are average. And before I came on, I was looking up complacency, right? So when you think of the message 18 years, complacency, a psychological state where an athlete or team, often after a period of success, feels overly satisfied with their current achievements and loses the drive or motivation to continue improving, training intensely, or pushing their limits. When you watch those two teams, that's the definition.
Right.
Of some of those guys. Not all of them. Cam Hayward played his best ball at the end, right? I mean, a lot of those guys played great ball. And I'm not sure about the culture thing because, you watch a Peyton Wilson play, you watch a Herbig play, you watch a Watt, you watch a Hayward, you watch a Ramsey, you actually watch Porter Jr. You've got some cats playing hard, right? Gainwell and and Warren.
Right.
So I'm not so sure it's a culture thing. I just think that, complacency, stale, and, just like Cleveland probably, you talked about ruined their season by signing Garrett to that huge contract and not putting any offensive weapons. We talked earlier, I had that outrageous trade with TJ Watt to the Seahawks for, Kenneth Walker. I'm glad that didn't happen.
Right.
But, did signing Watt and some of those guys limit them offensively to what they can get?
They had to rely on young guys for probably the last 7-8 years of Tomlin's tenure, and those subsequently are the years where they don't win a playoff game and they lose another one last night. And now, Wayne, you just mentioned Mike McCarthy. I want to get into just a moment for who they could hire. The big name out there is going to be Marcus Freeman, and I don't think that's the direction they're going to go. I don't think it's the direction they should go, and I don't think, quite frankly, Marcus Freeman's going to go. Adam Schefter reported a little bit earlier today that Marcus Freeman is expected to stay at Notre Dame. I don't think that's the right idea. I know that's their MO, go out, hire a young, defensive, energetic head coach. I just don't think that that's the answer. Mike McCarthy is an interesting one because I think you could bring an offensive jolt back into Pittsburgh. My question, Wayne, I guess becomes that is the age, right? Because I see this being a hire where Pittsburgh wants their head coach to be there for 15 more years because that's just what they do, right? It's what they've done for 50 years. And I wonder about McCarthy. Can I throw this out there to you?
Sure.
When I was watching the game last night and even beforehand, I started this theory on Saturday evening because I had not heard the noise that clearly was in, out a little bit towards the west. And to your point that they should hire an offensive guy, I agree with you. But I think it's going to be someone that's young, which rules out McCarthy. If I'm Pittsburgh, and they probably won't do this, but I think that they'd be foolish not to. I would be doing everything in my power to get Matt LaFleur out of Green Bay. I cannot understand, number one, why he is, in a lot of people's minds, wanting to be fired by Green Bay. The fans are obviously chanting for his head. I understand they couldn't win the game with a big lead last Saturday, and I know he hasn't had a lot of playoff success. You want to talk about a young offensive mind and a guy that's consistently one of the best head coaches in football? I would be going for him. I would be looking at Kevin Stefanski, as crazy as you can say that. I think he's a great offensive mind that could coach a quarterback. You have to have someone, in my view, Wayne, that has experience with coaching quarterbacks and offense that can make changes in year one or year two. I would be going after Matt LaFleur. I think that's the guy who they should be going after, number one.
Yeah, I just don't think Green Bay is going to let him go. I think Green Bay, thinks highly of him. I think it would be a great one. It's the it's not necessarily the McCarthy tree, but you certainly have the pedigree there with the quarterbacks, and you have Rodgers' endorsement. Why would you ever leave Green Bay, right? Why would you ever leave Pittsburgh? I guess those are two gems, right?
Right.
So I'm not sure. I think LaFleur's a Michigan kid. If I'm remembering, I might have played against him when he was at Saginaw Valley State in the playoffs. LaFleur and then Harriman's, and we played about 6 guys that played in the NFL on that Saginaw Valley squad. But yeah, I think LaFleur would be a home run. I don't see how Green Bay lets him go.
No, probably not. I agree too. And that's why I would even look at a guy like Stefanski, as crazy as that sounds. I think he's, to me, a better coach than what they give him credit for. And we saw what he did in Cleveland with more with less. Even with a Baker that wasn't up to par, up to the standards that he is now, I still think Kevin got the most out of him. And I don't think Pittsburgh's roster is bad by any stretch of the imagination. They still have a young offense, which is fine if you hire an offensive coach. But they'll probably end up going with a younger defensive guy. And most likely, I think Brian Flores is the one that jumps off the page to me before anybody else. That I think he would be somebody that to me would probably be somebody that what they would immediately look at. Chris Shula from the Rams, as funny as that sounds, A, with the legacy of his family, and B, that he's young and he's a defensive guy, and that's what Pittsburgh's gone after, those two. But nonetheless, Wayne, I think they need to hire somebody with the understanding that this is going to take a bit. It's going to take a bit because I think Tomlin could elevate a team to a higher floor than what the new head coach will. But his ceiling was lower. But I think you can expect, in my view, some losing seasons in the next couple of years, Wayne, especially given the fact that they're going to have to make some roster retools. And it probably, in my view, means getting rid of guys like Hayward, like Watt, not re-signing Jalen Ramsey and others.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a roster overhaul. And it just depends what the rest of the North looks like because they're all bad. So, you know what I mean? You might still be guaranteed 6 wins a year in that division.
Dude, if we would have told you after last season what would have happened in the North at the end of this year, it'd have been.
Well, I think I did. I said they would be the worst division in football, and really they probably were in the AFC. Yeah. You can argue the NFC might have been the NFC East, right?
Sure.
With Dallas debacle, Washington, and the Giants. But the NFC North, the AFC North went from the class of the AFC to the bottom very quickly.
And you're looking at Cincinnati and thinking to yourself, we may only need 7 wins, to your point, to win the division next year. Heck,
Yeah.
Cleveland probably feels like they can be competitive now, which is wild to think.
8-9's going to win it next year, baby.
9, 7, and 10. So I'm curious now. I'm interested. The Steelers are minus a coach. They might be minus a quarterback soon because I don't think Rodgers is coming back, but that's a different story for a different day. But just crazy, man. You said, you made a great point. What have you done for me lately? And I think 30 years ago, the thought of Harbaugh and Tomlin gone in the same year wouldn't have even been a thought. But here we are. And to me, the only thing that the Steelers have going for this job is the longevity part, in that whatever coach comes in knows their runway significantly longer than whatever other coaching job that they would have.
Well, you hope. You don't know. I mean, as these guys get a little bit older, you got this Jerry Jones, hey, I want to run the team until I win all the Super Bowls. But hey, Jerry, it ain't happening, right? And if you're the Rooney family, like, how much time do you have left on Earth?
Right.
So lots of variables out there to think about.
No doubt. And the Steelers are now gonna have to do it. And I'm very curious and interested to see how this plays out. And I think they'll probably hire a coach quick because that's what they do. They don't take long to hire coaches, and they haven't the last 2 times that they made hires. So Pittsburgh minus a head coach, Cleveland minus a head coach. Go ahead, Wayne. Well,
unless, to your point, you go out west, Clint Kubiak, whose name's surfacing at Seattle, Shula at LA, the guys that are still playing, right? So that's the conundrum you're in. You got some really good guys that are currently available, but you don't have a Joe Brady available. You don't have a Clint Kubiak available. You don't have a Chris Shula available. So you still got some guys out there that are tied up.
And that's the wild thing. 9 openings now in the league, Wayne. 9 openings, and 2 of them you could say are openings that come around once every 2 to 3 decades, and they're in the same division. So
more openings than playoff opportunities in each conference.
I know. It's almost like this league has divvied itself the cream of the crop from the terrible. The terrible is 95% of the league, because. And let's transition to this, Wayne. We'll stop talking Pittsburgh and talk about the team that's still in the tournament, because we might be going back to old roots again. And let's react to the team that I think is now going to make the Super Bowl. And I predicted them to lose in the AFC Championship game, but I might be revising my pick. How about the Buffalo Bills on Sunday against the Jags, Wayne? Not overly impressive, I understand. But they come out with a win on the road. Now they're going to face Denver in the divisional round coming up on Saturday. I want to get your thoughts to the game, because my thought process is this. I'll just make this statement. Josh Allen is the whole team, and in 99% of situations that would be bad. But I think he is capable of literally carrying this team to the Super Bowl, because nothing has changed with their makeup of their previous playoff runs compared to this year, except Kansas City's not in the tournament anymore. What do you make of this win on Sunday in the Bills with that come from behind victory over Jacksonville?
Yeah, I would say my immediate reaction is Jacksonville lost the game and Buffalo didn't win it.
Fair.
And I think the theme for me with the young coaches this weekend is stop going for it on 4th down and take the points.
Yeah.
So especially Jacksonville gets the fumble and the kickoff after they score. You've got to get points there.
Mm-hmm.
And 4th and 2 is not 4th and 1, and the play call's not great. Go up 10-3. Kick it again, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you got an opportunity there. So you lose by 3. You got a chance to go up by 7 there. You got to take the points in the playoffs. That's to me. This isn't the regular season. You can take that analytics and stick them everywhere, but you've got to take the points. I say the same thing. The Chargers get the turnover in New England, got the ball in the 2, and they go for it. They get no points. You only scored 3 all night. You gave 3 away right there.
I was astounded, Wayne, by the number of going for it in your own territory plays that happened over the week. It was crazy. And not going for it at their own 30.
I'm okay if you go for it there, really, with analytics. But when you got 3 points on the board, and all these games, the first 4 out of the 6 were 4 points or less.
Yeah.
Missed extra points, missed field goals, giving up points. You've got to score points in the playoffs because the defenses, for the most part, are pretty good. And to me, Jacksonville, I had flashbacks to Baltimore. You are, pardon my language, gashing them in the run game, and you want to get cute and throw flea flickers and throw the ball on first down in the tight windows. I don't understand. And then I was totally shocked that Jacksonville could not affect the quarterback and never brought pressure.
What surprised me, two things. That was number one. The second thing was the fact that the Jaguars abandoned the run game against a Buffalo defensive front that could not stop the run to save their lives all regular season. It was amazing to me. I
hate offensive coordinators.
One,
because I'm a defensive guy, but when I'm a fan, they're too cute. Just hand it off.
Well, but to your point, I think naturally as a DC, you try to simplify the game, right? Mm-hmm. Don't make it more difficult than you have to, because you don't know the play that's being called. You have to react to whatever the offense is doing. And I watch that game and I think to myself, the reason I think Buffalo can win the Super Bowl or get there is because at the end of the day, offensively, they just simplified the game by putting it in 17's hands. Mm-hmm. And Jacksonville on Sunday made it very clear that they did not trust what had gotten them to the postseason in running the football, letting Trevor Lawrence use his legs at times, and playing great defense. And they switched things up. I don't think Sean McDermott is an amazing coach, but I think he's smart enough to know the strengths of his team. And when I look at the rest of the playoff field and I look at that game, I think everything from that box score on Sunday is indicative of how the Bills won games in the regular season, and it was the same on Sunday. And I think if you put the ball in Josh Allen's hands and let him do what he wants, offensively, you don't have to call much. Just let the guy do what he wants. James Cook wasn't even effective. He had 46 yards on 15 carries, Wayne. So when I say I think Buffalo can now get to the big game, it's because they're the one team in the AFC left that I truly believe has an identity. I'm not saying that it's a feasible one. I'm not saying it's one that will win them the whole thing, but they have a player that can make plays so beautifully and simply that I don't necessarily trust New England to go in there and have Drake May come up with big clutch moments in divisional round games. I don't trust Denver with Bo Nix and the lack of the running game they have to put up enough points to beat Buffalo this week. Houston, maybe. Okay, you can convince me on the fact that they play solid defense and they can run the ball, but even their run game wasn't great against Pittsburgh last night until the second half. As crazy as it sounds, Wayne, Buffalo's got the least talent probably of the four teams left, but they play the game the simplest, and they did that on Sunday, and that's why I think they won the football game.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It was 17 up the middle, 17 left, 17 right. He single-handedly won it. He got beat up really, really a lot. That one on the goal line, I was scared that he might be done with the knee.
Right.
What's that knee look like today, right? Or what's that body look like today? So, I would agree with you that, they have an identity on both sides of the football, and that could be the key.
So let's just dive into this for a minute here, Wayne, and look to Saturday. I'm very curious to see what you think of this Bills Broncos. My question that I propose to you is, can Buffalo make the Super Bowl? You and I both had them. Well, you had them losing to Jacksonville. I had them losing this game, albeit I thought it'd be in the AFC Championship and not the divisional round. I think Buffalo in this game, to me, I don't know what the line is for this game. It's probably Denver's probably favored. That I cannot understand. I think Buffalo on the road, honestly, Jacksonville was playing better than what Denver was at the end of the season. I think this lines up really well for Buffalo. You're going to get a Denver team that plays good defense, but defense doesn't necessarily matter against Josh. And then Houston and New England are two relatively inexperienced playoff teams, at least in the last few years. I think there's a plausible path for the Bills to get to the Super Bowl. They're going to have to stop the run, but I don't think that they have to be amazing on defense to get there. Do you think this Bills team can get there?
I don't think they can. I think their end runs this week. I think Denver getting that week of rest. I think Sean Payton's a guy that, can simplify the game. I think Denver's defense and the way they impact the quarterback and affect the quarterback, will be the difference. And I think Denver will come after Josh. And I don't know how much people make of it, but the Mile High and adjusting to the altitude, being on the road 2 weeks, the travel. I just think that Denver will be good enough to win and won't make the mistakes that Jacksonville did.
Yeah.
Knicks might not have the experience, but Peyton's a very experienced coach, right? And that could be the difference.
Yeah, I'm going to go the opposite. I think the Bills are going to win on Saturday. And I think it's just because at the end of the day, they have the best player on the field for really, I don't want to say no other reason. I will say this, though. I thought for the first time during the Jags winning streak, including the game on Sunday, Trevor Lawrence didn't seem like himself. I don't know if that was a coverage thing that Buffalo was doing. I don't know if it was because they got a little more pressure to him, but it just felt like Trevor was a bit uneasy. And there's something to be said, in my view, Wayne, of the experience factor in the playoffs. And though Denver's got that in the head coach, you wonder if that defense on Saturday, and this is where, to me, Buffalo's plausible path to win is, if that defense starts having trouble with containing Josh, if you immediately start to play a little differently, maybe a little bit more on your heels, you back off the line of scrimmage. And I think that that's something that Buffalo has to take advantage of in the game. I think it's one of those things where Josh Allen plays early and James Cook runs the ball late. That, to me, is the recipe for Buffalo winning the game, because you have to soften up that defense, in my view, to be able to have success running the football. I think Buffalo should have done that last week, and they didn't. But to me, it's Josh early, James Cook late. What's your take on what Buffalo needs to do if they want a chance to win the game?
Yeah, I think Denver's going to affect the quarterback more than Jacksonville. So I would say you need a steady diet of James early. You need to establish the run, and use that to your advantage. Very impressed by I still think Buffalo has one of the better offensive lines, and they showed it by, even though they didn't run the ball great, I don't know how committed they were, to your point. But when he drops back, I was really shocked that Jacksonville couldn't impact him with those edge guys a little bit more in the passing game. When he got beat up, it was on the run games, right? He didn't get beat up in the pocket at all. So that surprised me with how well Buffalo's offensive line played. So if they play that way, they certainly have an opportunity.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I'm excited. Obviously, it's going to be a really cool, I think, endeavor for the Bills because, and I said this last week, Jacksonville might have been their hardest hurdle. I don't think Denver's any easier, but you win that game last week, you get a bit more confidence, and now you get to play in colder weather, which seems to be Josh's superpower. I think, Wayne, as we put a bow on this show, the last 8 teams, it's wide open. I think it's truthfully wide open. Your Seahawks are going to host San Francisco again. Yeah, they won 3 weeks ago, but it's the playoffs. It's hard to beat a team twice in that span. Houston, New England will be a great game. Houston, to me, might be the team that has the scariest unit out of any team left in the playoffs. And the Rams Bears, to me, is a toss-up if Chicago can keep the magic. So I think this is wide open. It's cool to get to see, but it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. This final 8, to me, validates why there are 9 coaching openings in the NFL. Because we just do not have a dynamic superpower. And I also think that just in my view, you've got a lot more mediocrity in the league than you do talent and great teams.
Yeah, we talked about parity, and I'm feeling a bit nostalgic. Houston, love you blue, Denver, right? You got Houston and Denver. Who would have thought? You got, New England, and Buffalo. You could end up having, an old AFC South or an old AFC East, championship game.
Yeah.
And then in the NFC, it's been forever since the Bears have been good, but you got the Bears and the Rams. I think that one could be a 52-45 game. And then, it's amazing what Shanahan's done. You talk about mediocrity and parity and all, but, this guy just finds a way. Like, you talk about Tomlin and Harbaugh, what they've got out of their team, and look at the flip side of what Shanahan's got out of a bunch of guys that, have been injured, and then losing Kittle to, I think that's the big one this week for the Seattle game is, with Kittle being out that allows Seattle to be even more aggressive.
Totally agree. And it's funny, no one talks about elevating teams if you're an offensive coach, right? Because you're expected to score points no matter what. San Francisco has had about one season-ending injury. Feel like every week this season they still somehow make it happen. And that will be a fun game. Seahawks and Niners. That's the night game on Saturday, and then Bills Broncos is before that. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I think we're going to get a little bit more clarity here, but it's still wide open. I mean, whatever four teams make it, it's still going to be a wide open dance to the Super Bowl. But it's not going to include Pittsburgh. It's not going to include Baltimore or Cleveland. Maybe we'll see if these teams have head coaches, Wayne. Who do you think hires a head coach first between those three teams?
Oh, between those three teams, I would say Baltimore.
Okay. I think you're just hoping. Well, I know you don't want Mike McCarthy, but I think you just want McCarthy somewhere. As long as he's somewhere as a head coach, I think you're going to be happy.
No, I don't think about that. I mean, if he doesn't get a job, I just think Baltimore needs more of a sense of urgency. I think Cleveland's dysfunctional, and I think Pittsburgh will take their time. Now the other thing is, if I'm Baltimore and I want Minter, he's available. Let's go get him. If you're Baltimore and you want Flores, he's available. Let's go get him. If you want Kubiak, and I think Kubiak has been in the Baltimore organization before.
Yes,
got some ties there. I will never ever watch the Ravens again if they hire Kingsbury or McDaniel. So I will throw all of my Ravens things away, and I will become whatever you tell me to be, a Bills, Browns, or Steelers fan, and will never mention, because those two clowns. I mean, how is McDaniel getting 8 interviews? What am I doing wrong?
I was going to say you should throw your name in the hat there. I actually thought so. I was confused when the Browns put on social media that they were interviewing him as a candidate. I saw the picture and I thought that he was being named head coach. I thought, what on earth is he like? What's their thought process?
I can see the Browns doing something like hiring McDaniel or Kingsbury. And, to me, Kingsbury, God bless him, Texas Tech, run and shoot. You can't sustain that in the NFL. You got Jaden Daniels killed, right? We've seen it's very difficult, to throw the ball 55 times a game and win a Super Bowl. I mean, when's the last team that's done that? The K-gun with Buffalo, all those prolific offenses got shut down defensively. So I just don't know where you go there. To me, I think the reason that Dan got rid of Kingsbury in DC was the lack of called runs, right? You did some cute things out there, but you've got to run the football in this league. And you can point to the Steelers, 2.1 yards a carry on first down, couldn't run the football. And I'll just say, if we're signing off, Houston reminds me of Baltimore with Billick and Trent Dilfer. They didn't score an offensive touchdown for 7 games, and they won a Super Bowl. C.J. Stroud scared me to death last night. In that game, I don't know if I trust C.J. Stroud, but is this going to be a 6-3, 9-6 game? And Houston's just going to be better on defense, make the turnover, the big play. I don't know if I trust either quarterback in that game. So that could be, a 6-3 wonderful defensive struggle if you're into watching those kinds of games.
But to me, for Houston, and I think this is what I think makes Texans fans excited, is you can play a playoff game on the road where you go -3 in the turnover department early, and it doesn't make a lick of difference. Like there was not a single soul in that building thought Houston was out of the game or was going to lose the game.
And that's a total outlier, man. If you're -2 or -3, your chances of winning are like 11%.
But that's what I'm getting at. I mean, they could be -3 against New England next week, and I still think they'd have a chance to win, because I just think that defense is good enough. Maybe not, but they're the one team in the playoffs that could do it.
Right.
And you mentioned defense and running the football. Houston, New England, they do it well. James Cook was the rushing champ for Buffalo. We know the Seahawks do it well. The Niners have McCaffrey. And oh, by the way, DeAndre Swift had a career high in rushing yards this season, and the Rams have a 3-back system that worked great. So you still got to run the ball. You still got to play defense. Defense still wins championships.
13 personnel, the Rams, 3 tight ends, baby. I love it. I mean, that's a dream, man.
Hey, Colby Parkinson had the highlight of the weekend, man. Colby Parkinson out of everybody else. So maybe you should go back to hiring a defensive coach if you're these teams out there, and maybe you should put Wayne on your calendar because he hasn't gotten a call yet, but you should.
Just an analyst. Just an analyst.
Hey, man.
Situational football guy. Just a guy that says, hey, man, there's 4 minutes on the clock. You know, we need to run 6 plays. Take 35 seconds each time. Stay in bounds.
Man, sometimes that's all you need to do. Just be smart and be simple. That's the theme of the episode. Just keep
it simple, stupid. Kiss.
Amen.
Leave you with a kiss.
Amen to that, my friend. Hey, great stuff tonight, man. Can't wait to watch the games this upcoming weekend, and we'll see if the teams have a coach. But great stuff, and I don't know what's in store for next week. I'm not ready.
Should be fun. Should be exciting.
All right, that's Wayne Bradford, as always. Great to join us on the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. Brought to you, of course, as always, by our friends at Repage Investments. We will see you later this week for more Gem City shows. We'll see what kind of chaos comes our way next week. See you, everybody.